Hello and welcome back to the channel. I hope you're doing well. Feel free to grab your favourite supplies and sketch along with me today, or just pop me on in the background, whatever you fancy. Today I'm working in a Strathmore Mixed Media 500 series sketchbook. I believe it's called the Mixed Media Journal, and it is 100% cotton paper, and I have the hardbound roughly A5 size. I am holding down the sheets with binding clips with paper just so that it doesn't dig into the actual sheets of paper. The sketchbook lays flat for the most part, not as much as I would like, and where I am at in the sketchbook right now, the pages do tend to curl up a little bit, but I can work around it with the clips. This is my first time using this kind of sketchbook. It's the first one I've bought and the first one I'm filling. So I've been trying out lots of different kinds of mediums and sketching and illustration techniques in the sketchbook in order to gain an understanding of what the paper's like and whether I like the sketchbook or what I like to use it for, and whether I'd be interested in using one in the future, and if I am, what kinds of mediums I'd want to use with it. On the left hand page of the spread, you can see some head studies that I did on another day, and these were done in ballpoint pen, in black ballpoint pen. Just ballpoint pen straight, there's no pencil undersketch with them. And so far I've been enjoying ballpoint pen and also using ballpoint pen and watercolour on top. I'm planning on doing a spread for a future video soon, hopefully, doing ballpoint and watercolour washes as a whole spread. So let me know if you'd be interested in that in the comments. The piece that I'm working on in this video, though, on the right hand side, I started with a pencil drawing and then I tidied it up a little bit, especially with sort of setting in place exactly where I wanted the flowers to be. And then I did brush pen on top, so I had a few different pens to the side, you can see there, and I mainly used the brush pen and I used the 0.2 millimeter pen for the whiskers, and I didn't end up using the acrylic marker in the end. I was considering using the acrylic paint marker to do some of the fill-ins, but I didn't end up needing to fill in that much, so I just filled it in with the black brush pen anyway, which you can see for it's just like the corners of the mouth, the eyes and the nostrils, pretty much the colouring in that I had to do with the black, so it wasn't that intense. I didn't really need the acrylic marker in the end. The cat I'm actually drawing today is one of my cats. It's Skye is her name, and both of my cats are black and white, but Skye is mainly black with a little bit of white, whereas our other cat is white with a bit of black. So we have, and they're both sisters. They're both from the same litter. And Skye loves spending time outside and she loves sitting in really tall grass. And I decided to go with some bluebells around her because we've had a lot of bluebells blooming in our garden and around just the area in general. We've got blue bluebells, pink bluebells, and white bluebells, but they're starting to die off a little bit now as we're getting more into summer, and I thought I'd try to capture them before they're completely gone. The other week I did some studies of the bluebells and colour studies outside plein air with my 6 colour limited palettes, which is what I'm going to be using today to do the watercolour stage of this sketch. And I hope that helps some of you get a better understanding of the 6 colour palette that I have in action. I've done some videos briefly going over it a little bit in the past, going over some colour mixes and discussing my colour choices. So now I'm going to go forward and do some more like practical examples with the palette in action for you. So this will be the first one. I'm interested in trying to film something plein air when I'm using it as well, which will be a little bit more tricky to set up camera wise outside, but I'll see if I can make it happen and get some kind of tripod setup going for it. But for today, the colouring stage of this is going to be done in watercolour using the 6-colour palette, and then some finishing details on Skye, on the cat, are going to be done in colour pencil over the top, and the colour pencils that I'm going to end up using are the Polychromos colour pencils. I had to think for a moment because my head thought of Prismacolor, but I knew it wasn't Prismacolor, it's Polychromos was what I used. I am still playing around quite a bit with using watercolour on this paper. The paper is cotton and it has some nice features and feeling when you're using it with watercolour because of its cotton content. But at the same time, the sizing on it is quite interesting to get used to. It dries very, very quickly, much quicker than other cotton papers I'm used to, and I have to adjust how I paint in order to accommodate for that. It also tends to dry oddly in some areas, especially along the edges of washes. It kind of starts to recede in on itself, which is something that I've noticed with I think it's hard sized paper. I think it can happen with, I want to say it can happen with Fabriano paper, but I am not super sure right now. I've tried a few different kinds of Fabriano paper. This is all cotton, and Saunders Waterford. For loose sheets, I am mainly using Saunders Waterford at the moment. So this is loose 300 GSM, which I think is £140 watercolor paper. So that's like the actual, well, the quote unquote actual watercolor paper that I use. And then I have a Fabriano Artistico block, which is nice, but it definitely has a different feel to it with the sizing. So another kind of paper that I have heard tends to stay wet for a very, very long time due to its sizing difference is arches, which I haven't tried yet. I'm very interested in trying arches, and especially I want to try the hot press in order to do the more ink and watercolor kind of illustrations and paintings I like doing. And what I have heard about it is that it is, I don't know how you describe the sizing necessarily, but the sizing allows for the paper to stay wet for a much longer period, so you're able to paint very, very large areas and then connect it back together. You're able to do really, really soft blends without having to do it immediately, whereas on this paper you have to do things a little faster and also adjust for things a little bit as well. So one of the things that I had to adjust for in this illustration was when I was doing the more darker black fur on Skye, because I wanted to show some of the variations in the density of her fur, especially towards the eyes right above her cheekbones, connecting her eyes to her ears. There's like a sort of almost, it's not quite a bald patch, it's just a very thin area of fur, which you can see on quite a few cats, apart from really long hair cats. And it makes you see more of the sort of brown and grey of her skin underneath. And in order to do that, I had to rely more upon re-wetting the edge and lifting the colour in order to get the effect that I wanted, rather than relying on things like blending and adding in water, because of how it dries. It would just end up leading to more sort of a cauliflowering effect rather than the soft blending I would have wanted. So it's not necessarily a bad sketching paper, it's more just something I'm having to learn and adjust to, which is something you find when you try different kinds of mediums and different kinds of materials, paper especially. It doesn't necessarily, just because you're not used to a certain paper doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It's more that you just have to learn to adjust to it. There are definitely some scenarios where a paper is just downright bad, or subjectively or objectively it's bad. You might just really, really not get along with a paper. In this case, it's not that I don't get along with it. I just need to practice a lot more with this particular kind of sizing and how watercolour acts with it. I have really been enjoying this sketchbook with gouache, traditional designer's gouache, and I may do a video of a paint with me using gouache soon, just to show you how enjoyable gouache has been on this paper. Just straight off the bat, there's been no real needing for adjusting necessarily with gouache on this paper like I have had to with watercolour, just because the way I use gouache has a slightly different process and technique than when I'm using watercolour, and this paper works really, really well for that. Right now you can see me going in with the final layer of the black fur, and you'll see me then working on the area here by her ear where I'm trying to get the effect of the thinning fur, both there and on the bridge of the nose near her eye. And I end up going back in and softening that harsh line and lifting it a little bit using some tissue paper. I also add in a little bit of bluey purple shadows on the undersides of the white fur where I've put the brush pen lines, and then also adding in some little areas of the blue fur as well where there isn't line art as well. And then I go in and just add in some extra details onto the bluebell flowers. So one thing that I noticed when I was doing the colour studies of the bluebells when I was outside was that there was quite a lot of purple accents to them, especially in almost like stripes of purpley violet. And also I noticed that at the tops of the flowers where they were all budded together still, there were a lot more greens and grey blues and very greyed out colours, which I tried to end up using in this as well, where I blended in greyed out blues and purples into greyed greens and then transitioned into the lighter and then deeper blues. So by doing the plein air colour study, I was then able to take that knowledge and use it in this afterwards, which is always fun to do, is to study things from life and from nature and then take what you learn and put them into illustrations and sketches and drawings and things like that. It's really fun. It's one of the things I enjoy with art. You can see me coming in now with the colour pencil, and this is to kind of bring together all of the areas of the fur and to also just add a little bit more contrast and also contrast in texture between the cat and the flowers. I also used it to smooth out some areas and add a little bit of colour variation in some areas as well, because I wasn't sure how much detail I wanted to put in with the line art. I didn't know if I wanted to, for example, define the muzzle area with line or if I wanted to do it with colour. So what I did in the end was experiment with using an indigo around the muzzle to to use some of the undertones I can see in her fur there in order to distinguish the muzzle area from the cheek fur and things like that. So it was just playing around and seeing what works and what doesn't. And I do quite like the effect on this paper of using colour pencil on top. But I do have to be a little bit careful about colour pencil transferring onto the other side of the paper. Here is the finished drawing. Thank you so much for watching and for everyone who has been liking and subscribing. I love you all so much and thank you so much for your support. I'll see you next time in next week's video. Bye!